Today on Ask Miyazaki, we talk about how to approach a social media campaign for a startup, how millennials and Gen Zers can better market themselves professionally on social, will marketers need to work harder in the future, and what's the next big thing in marketing? Sydney asks, what do you think will be the next big thing? Do you think social media will continue to be as useful as it is nowadays? Do you think marketers will need to work harder? A great set of questions, Sydney. I'm going to actually answer your questions in reverse order, though. So let's start with your third question. Will marketers need to work harder in the future? That's an easy one. The answer is absolutely yes. And there are several reasons why. Let's talk about 3 of those reasons. First of all, there are a lot of other people that are entering the marketing area and they're learning a lot about marketing. So for example, we've always had people coming into marketing from PR and communications, but now we're getting a lot of people that are coming in from psychology and sociology and anthropology and even from the sciences. And what's happening is they're realizing that they can use their people skills or their understanding of data and analytics and to come into marketing and to do well and to make a big contribution. Also, the people in marketing are learning a lot more. And while they're learning, then whether it's informal learning like through blogs and YouTube, or it's formal learning where they're going on and getting a master's degree in a specialized marketing area, either way, they're learning more how to do their job well, which means it's a lot more work for the marketers that currently exist in the field. Number 2 is technology. There's a lot of technology out there now that is helping marketers to do their job better. Now, granted, there are a number of marketers who are going to rely too much on the technology, and that technology can be like a little whirlpool and suck you down into this comfort zone of feeling like the technology is going to solve your problems. It's not going to solve the problems. In fact, there are a lot of people that rely on the technology that don't understand the algorithms behind it, and those people can actually get into a pretty bad situation because they'll let the technology drive their marketing instead of using the technology as a tool and making sure that their thinking drives the marketing. But either way, technology is making it more difficult for marketers in the future. And the third factor is that buyers, both B2B buyers, business buyers, and actual consumers, they're getting more informed and perhaps a little bit smarter about all of the marketing gimmicks and techniques that they're using to persuade them. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm suggesting that we aren't honest in our communications. Of course, we have to do that. We don't want to lie to our customers. But still, we have to get their attention. We have to spark some interest. We have to get them to desire our product and to act. The basic AIDA model. The idea is that we have to think of new, clever ways, and we have to always be thinking about what we can do, not necessarily to convince our buyer or our prospective buyer, but to outthink the other marketers. So will marketing get harder in the future? The answer, absolutely yes. A lot more work for marketers, but it's worthwhile. It's very valuable to do it. Your second question, will social media be as useful in the future? Social media is not going anywhere. It's going to be just as useful, if not more useful in the future. But I think what we have to look at there is that we're going to get some new platforms. And those new platforms aren't necessarily going to replace the Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and LinkedIn and all these. But I think some of these new platforms are going to come in and they're going to have higher standards as far as verification of who is who they say they are. In other words, there's a lot of problems we have right now where a lot of the issues we're having around social media are because of people that are hiding behind some type of a fake profile. And because of that, they feel very much empowered to hurt other people and say hurtful things. That's going to drive people away from certain social platforms, but new ones will come in. They're going to have stricter verification standards, and they're probably going to end up holding people to certain standards on communication. That might be good or might be bad. I think the idea is that people are going to feel more comfortable forming groups and communities where they can feel comfortable saying something and not feel like someone's going to attack them all the time. I think that's the biggest problem we have right now in social media. So will it be useful? Yes, but I do think it's going to be a little bit different. So let me answer now your first question last, which is, what will be the next big thing? I'm assuming you mean the next big thing in marketing. The next big thing in marketing will be interactivity. Right now, a lot of marketers kind of fake the interactivity. Some rely on artificial intelligence, and we've all been in those websites where we get under the chat bot, and the chat bot starts to tell us things, and we realize it's AI, and we're not really impressed, and we can't really get the answers that we want, and it frustrates us. Other times, marketers try to use kind of a shotgun approach to kind of get a message out there and hope that it resonates with some of their audience, but it doesn't really resonate with everybody. So the key to true interactivity in the future is going to be that people are actually going to one-on-one respond back. And there's going to be a lot more of that. If you think about it, if you start to look at niche marketing and looking at smaller segments, then that's the opportunity. And I think a lot of marketers in the past have always thought that they had to grow their brands huge or grow their businesses huge. But there's a lot of money to be made in a smaller market that really appreciates you. And you can sell to that market, and you can have a lot more personal interactivity with those people. So the next big thing, interactivity, which means start to invest in processes that will make that interactivity more efficient. Thank you so much. Great questions. Tomas asks, how would you approach the first social media campaign of a startup? What percentage of the investment would you think should be destined to that purpose? Tomas, I think you know the answer to this, and that answer is, it depends. But I'm not going to just give you that answer. Let me talk a little bit about this idea of what you should do with a startup with social media. Now, of course, the it depends part would mean it depends on what your goals are for the startup. It depends on what your marketing plan is. It depends on how much money you've allocated to social and your other types of advertising or promotions. But I will say this. The key really here is to think about what social is going to do for you. And typically with a startup, if I really didn't have much money in that startup, or I didn't have enough funding for a lot of advertising, I'd be more along the lines of thinking that I want to build community and build brand within that community before I start to spend a lot of money on advertising. And I can do that through unpaid social. In other words, start to build communities. In fact, even build a community before you even launch the product. Build that community around the people you think will be the right people to purchase your product in the future. And it's up to you. Let them know. Say, listen, we're building this community now. We know we're going to launch something in the future, but we want to get your ideas and your feedback and understand and build this community of people that can support each other. And then the product comes along. There's all sorts of options on how you can do that. And when you start to build those communities, that's an opportunity to kind of understand the marketplace a little bit better before you start spending the money on the paid social media advertising. When you do start to do paid, what I would say is, and because you asked the question about budgeting as well, that's the beauty of social media advertising. In the old days, if you wanted to go on television, you had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to have this amazing ad on TV. Or you had to pay a significant amount of money to get billboards all around the city or get into the magazine. Now with social media advertising, you can do all sorts of testing and you can try it out and you can say, well, let me spend a couple $100s here and a couple $100s there. Let me test out what works best. I know with one of the big projects that I work on that we know that social media is going to bring in bottom line buyers every single time. We know that they'll go through the funnel. We know how much to spend to bring the people in at the bottom, and we know that it's cost effective. But that's not always the case, especially for a startup and especially for a new product. So I would say, think about the idea that you can test it, see if it works. Maybe you'll find out that social works better than display and search ads. If that's the case, then move your money and transfer it over to social. If for some reason you find that search works better, then reduce your social and move over to search. That's the wonderful thing, is that you can continue to tweak it, going back and forth, testing and finding out what works, rather than making a commitment ahead of time that you're going to spend X number of dollars or a certain percentage of your budget on social or on something else. Great question. Sarah Lee asks, how can millennials and Gen Z better market themselves professionally on social media? You know I love this question because I really enjoy talking about the idea of marketing yourself and building your brand. And whether it's these generations or other generations, I will say this, that oftentimes the younger the generation, the less likely that they are concerned about what's going to happen post-college when they're trying to look for a job. And I know in high schools, even back in middle schools right now, they're teaching the kids, listen, be careful about what you put on social because whatever you put on social is going to affect you later on. But honestly, the typical 8th or 9th or 10th grader, they're not thinking about what's going to happen after college. They're either thinking that it doesn't matter, or maybe they're thinking that by that time things will be different and people won't really care. But we know right now that politicians or big business people that did something 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, it's coming back to affect them now. And with social media, it's not going to be hidden away for 10 or 20 or 30 years. It's going to be very easily findable and very easily noticeable and shareable with somebody else. Right now, if you go and look for a job and you've got all sorts of content on your social media that the employers don't really feel is going to be representing their brand well, then it's very likely that they're going to say, you know what, this isn't the right person for us to hire. And that's a serious thing. So what do you do? So on one side, what's happening is our professional brands, what we do at work, are becoming more connected to our personal brands, what we do away from work. So it might have been that you used to go out and do whatever you wanted to do. And I'm not saying necessarily something even bad, but something that perhaps doesn't mesh with what the stated values of the company are, or even the unstated values for that matter. So what happens is the person who's doing these particular activities over here, if it doesn't mesh over here on this other side, then there's going to be a conflict. And maybe you don't even want to have that type of job, but you want a good job. And so either you have to somehow stop doing what you're doing over here, or stop having it on social, which might be really tough as well, or you have to make sure that you have some type of a justification so that this other side, the business side, is going to be okay with it. Maybe you have to talk about the well-roundedness of who you are, and then maybe they'll accept that. But the key really is to think about that. I don't want to say that I want people limited, but the truth is that as much as what you do in your personal social media is going to limit what happens in your professional brand, what happens with your professional brand will also limit your personal. When you've moved up to that point of being a bank vice president or whatever else, you may decide there's certain things that you can't do anymore because it's going to affect what happens over here. It's going to affect how you're able to be perceived by the other people, by the board of directors or whatever else, and it'll perceive you. So if I were to give a couple actually big pieces of advice to any younger generation, I would say number one, consider the idea that whatever you do that gets caught on social media is indeed going to have an effect on you getting a job, being promoted, and keeping that job in the future. On the other hand, I don't want people to be so limited that they feel that they can't go out and enjoy their lives. They have to understand that whatever they do in that life may have that effect, but then they just have to make sure that they find a job or find a position or find a company or a brand that's willing to accept that their people are people and they're not going to always perfectly mesh with whatever those brand values might be. Because the truth is that there's always something that doesn't have that connection over there, but it's okay because we're all people. That's all for today. Thank you for the questions. I always appreciate them very much. If you have a question about digital marketing, personal branding, market communications, social media, analytics, or anything related, tweet it on Twitter using the hashtag AskMiyazaki. If you have not already subscribed, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can be notified of future Ask Miyazaki videos, as well as Monday's Marketing Minute or whatever else comes your way. And have a great day.